Hi, I'm Amelia Robinson, the Columbus Dispatch's opinion and engagement editor. Welcome to Columbus Conversations, Why Aren't People Working? This is the latest in a new town hall series about issues important to this community. Help wanted signs, as we all know, are all over Greater Columbus, and it's just not an issue here. The nation is experiencing a worker shortage. Nearly 4.6 million workers quit their jobs in August, according to the Labor Department. That was up from 4 million in July and is by far the most in 2 decades. There are many reasons for this, as we are going to discuss with our great panelists in just a few minutes. We also invite you to take part in this conversation through Facebook. If you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat and I will get to as many as I can. This event is part of the Dispatch's celebration of 150 years of service to Greater Columbus and the rest of the state. One of our panelists could not be here, Mark Fluhart, Executive Director of the Central Ohio Labor Council, was not able to attend, but we have a great panelist, great list of panelists rather, who will be talking about this issue. Before I introduce them though, I wanted to remind you, you can support programs like this by subscribing to the Dispatch at dispatch.com/subscribe now. So on to our panelists. We have Sean Hendricks, who is president of Nissan, Chemtech America, and president of the Central Ohio Manufacturing Partnership. We have Stephanie Hightower, who is CEO and president of the Columbus Urban League. Bill Lafayette, the owner of Regionomics. Jabat Osu, who is the dean of College of Professional Studies and associate professor of management at Wilberforce University. We have Rance Robinson, who is no relationship to me, who is an entrepreneur. He's the owner of Rob the Moment, a visual company, as well as a real estate broker through Red One Realty. And finally, but not last in anybody's heart, we have Sheila Trotner, who is president of Taste Hospitality Group and the board chair of Ohio Restaurant Associations. So welcome everybody to this conversation. I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk to the community about why we are experiencing a worker shortage. So a lot of people have a lot of theories about why this is happening, but just so we start off on the solid ground, where have all the workers gone in your opinion?
Well, they were not sitting on the sidelines waiting for their benefits to run out. If so, then we would have seen a really big jump in the labor force once the benefits ended. And we did see an increase in September in Ohio's labor force, but no more than what we saw in June, July, and August. And the same's true elsewhere. Missouri ended their supplemental benefit back in June. Workforce officials saw virtually no increase in applicants the first few weeks after that. So, as usual, it's about more than money.
So we actually had a couple people in comments already link it to the pandemic and the requirements for vaccines. Does anybody think that has anything to do with this?
I do.
It's a part of it.
Yes,
Yeah,
I would say it's part of it, but I want to go back, Bill. I think money does have something to do with this. And I'm talking about those individuals who have historically been low-wage earners, no longer feel the need to go to a low-wage job when they have benefits or there's housing stabilization dollars that are out there, or they just, they'll figure out how to survive, with their own side hustle at this point. But, what we find, and I wish Mark was here because he can corroborate this, Mark Fluharty, we have an apprenticeship program here at the Columbus Urban League with the trades. We also have one, Driving Futures, where you get your CDL license, and we have another one, Build Back Better. And right now we have over 850 people on a waiting list for these programs. We can only take around 30, 25 to 30 at a time. But these jobs that they are training for are not low wage jobs. These are middle class jobs. This is about how you build back the community. And so it's not that people don't want to go to work, but they don't want to go to work and make those low wages it's just, I'd rather stay home and figure out, be with my family and my kids and do my side hustle, but I'm not going to a 12, 13, 14 hour dollar job because it's not worth it.
I want to agree with that, but you asked the question, where are they? And I think they are there, but they are being selective in terms of what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
It was back in the day when employers just post positions and the labor take it as it comes. So if you don't take it, the next person is willing to take the available minimum wage. Now, employees and workers are looking at, say, hey, I've got to be choosy. I have to be selective. It used to be your turn. Now it's my turn.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, what guarantees do I have working for you? How do you guarantee my safety? Because if you don't guarantee my safety and give me what I want, I'm not going to work for you. Guess what? Wages have been stagnating for a long time in this country, right? But people have been living. And during the pandemic, most people did not work, but they found a way to live. So if we can find a way to live without your job, then I think I can still consider myself living the way I live, because with this pandemic, I don't need much. We did not buy a lot of groceries. We didn't buy a lot of shoes. We didn't buy a lot of stuff, and we lived okay. So I don't have to come back to this $12 an hour job, but they are there.
And that kind of brings us to Rand's too. You kind of made a jump during the pandemic. You changed jobs and kind of went into your own thing, right?
Absolutely, I did. I think what a lot of people are doing during this pandemic, it caused people to choose themselves. There was a go. That's what we did before we were shut down. And a lot of people didn't have time to think the way that we did during the pandemic during the quarantine. And so I think that that's really changed a lot. I think people begin to see their mental health increase. I think people begin to see their peace increase. And for a lot of folks, it was, I'm not going back there. For a lot of people, it was, we can work from home. I can do this job remotely. So there are a lot of reasons. And I couldn't do that in my career, but I was dealing with a toxic work environment that caused me to choose myself.
And has it been easy for you?
There are challenges, but it's not a financial thing. I think the biggest challenge for everyone dreaming about pie in the sky entrepreneurship is you have to realize that every action that you take when you're dealing with your business, it's going to be the food on the table for you, so to speak. So you have to be focused. You have to learn how to set your time. You have to time block. You have to really stay on schedule. So it's not a situation where you leave your job, you become an entrepreneur, and then all of a sudden everything falls into place. No, you still have to work, but you are in control. You're not asking anyone for time off. You're not asking anyone for sick time. You're not asking anyone if you can go on vacation. And these are the empowerments that have happened during the pandemic, where a lot of people are saying, I'm not going back to that. And I'm one of them. I can't see myself returning to it.
Now, Sheila, do you think that happened in the restaurant industry? I know personally, a lot of my friends who work in hospitality, they were bartenders, and before the pandemic, they made lots of money, and they were waitresses, and they made lots of money. But during the pandemic, it was very hard for them, and many of them decided, this is it, I'm done. Are you seeing that happening in your industry, or am I just,
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, the industry has been hit quite hard by the pandemic. When the pandemic happened, or prior to the pandemic happening, the restaurant industry already had labor concerns, both in the kitchen and with service teams. The pandemic certainly exacerbated that. It doesn't matter if you're a national chain, mom and pop, big, small, regional operator, the lack of employees makes it so much more difficult to run a restaurant business. But when the pandemic happened, I felt the majority of employees in the industry were laid off because businesses were forced to close their indoor dining. And so this pushed many to look for new forms of employment outside of this industry, outside of the food service industry. And I think that when restaurants were able to reopen, many had already left the industry and appreciated their work from home opportunities or the flexibility, less evening responsibilities. And even I read recently with the National Restaurant Association that we still have nearly 1.4 million job openings in this industry right now. So it's definitely, it's been tough, and we're no longer paying. I mean, this industry has been known, or I would say categorized as paying minimum wage, but at this point, we're not. Like, it's very competitive out there. I would say that when I talked to numerous operators being involved with the Ohio Restaurant Association, and wages are high, and there's also we're doing a lot to try to stay competitive in the marketplace, whether that's flexibility, competitive PTO, and just trying to have people come and say, hey, this is a great place to work. And I think owners are thinking outside the box. Let's put it that way.
What do you think it's going to ultimately mean for diners as far as like the price of a meal when they go out? Do you think we're going to see increases?
Yeah, actually, I think that's a great question. Because so many restaurants have had to pivot their businesses, absolutely. It's not just the labor, but there have been a myriad of restrictions that restaurant owners have had to deal with the past year and a half, whether that's mandates, curfews, challenges with the supply chain and sales pressure, inflation, lack of employees as well. So I do think that do not be surprised if menu prices go up because the restaurant industry already runs on such a tight margin that I think you'll find that especially small operators are going to have to find ways to stay afloat and to stay alive out there. So I would not be surprised if consumers start seeing some menu bumps in prices.
They're going to have to.
Mm-hmm.
There's no choice.
Yep, absolutely.
So I'm looking at the chat, and Courtney Swan, she just wrote childcare. And Stephanie, we had a conversation about this earlier. In all you guys' area, how big is childcare as an issue? You're on mute.
Yeah, childcare is a huge barrier right now as well. And we being able to have some flexibility is needed. But we had a situation where we had working with a temp agency, and we couldn't find people. Well, we could find people, but as soon as a child comes to school with COVID, then the whole classroom shuts down. Then the whole classroom has to shut down. Then all the parents now have to find that additional childcare. You don't have the after school programs out there that we had before. And so we're trying to figure out, especially for working folks, how do we, especially working poor folks, how do we, create opportunities for after school programming in facilities that are safe for parents to be able to stay at work. But yeah, we've got to tackle this childcare, issue. And then, we also have situations right now. I was talking to the Columbus City Schools superintendent today, and they can't find substitute teachers, and they're having to close down or bus drivers. Out in some of the suburban districts, they're paying $185 a day now for substitutes to come in. And because they can't find folks, and again, a lot of that is those people don't have childcare to be able, the teachers to be able to stay at work. So it's bus drivers don't have childcare. And there's a huge shortage where they're having to shut down schools because you can't get the bus drivers to be able to take kids to school. So it's having a ripple effect. It's not just child; it's all of those different components related to our children and school that are also having a large impact on people being able to go back to work on a regular basis.
Now, Sean, are you seeing this in the manufacturing world?
Yes, to some degree. So our main customer shut down back on March 23rd of 2020. The Friday before that, my company, we were minus 4 total associates in our company of 325. We are now minus about 65 to minus 70 employees right now that we could hire tomorrow if we can find them. And, to emphasize Stephanie's point, I believe there were about 2.4 million women left the workforce in the United States from February of 2020 to February of 2021. So yes, obviously, I think childcare has a major portion or reason for why a lot of women have left the workforce. And in our industry, we're a plastic injection molder. Probably 45% of our workforce is women or was women.
Well,
Amelia,
here's part of the problem. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh,
You want to add something?
well, part of the problem is that last year in Central Ohio, the average wage for a child care worker was $12.47 an hour. Now, obviously, the market's going to bid that wage up, but that's going to put pressure on providers to increase rates when many people already find childcare unaffordable, more than $10,000 a year in many cases.
So if we look at this childcare issue, and I think it's huge. Let's look at it from this perspective. Who really needs childcare? All these frontline essential workers that provide critical care and critical services in our communities are the ones that need them. Nursing assistants, home health aides, grocery store cashiers. These are very, very critical and essential services that we all need in our community. And these are the people, the women that need the most. Guess what? They are the ones also earning the least in our society. So childcare is a huge deal in this discussion.
What do you think the future of childcare will look like as far as the pandemic has infected? Will people be able to, and women too, will women be able to bounce back from this, or what's the forecast, do you think?
If people can't afford it, I don't see how they can continue. It was expensive before the pandemic. I have a 5-year-old son, and we were blessed enough to have our childcare be provided by a family member. But when I listen to some people talk about $1,200 a month just for childcare without the rest of their expenses being, put into the equation, something has to give eventually. And either it's going to be the pricing structure or people are going to have to make more money.
So speaking of that, have you guys all have hired people, obviously, or have people who work for you in one way or another? Has that changed at all? Are you offering folks more higher wages, more time off, different incentives across your industries?
If we look at when we came back out of the 2008 housing crash, right? This issue came up, childcare came up. And that is when the federal government decided to put a lot of traction in community colleges, because the jobs that were coming back weren't coming back in their old form. They needed some level of scale. So this is also going to happen after the pandemic. The jobs that are going to be there are going to be very, very skillful. And the people that work in these areas, these nursing assistants, grocery store cashiers. Employers are going to have to look at them and say, okay, how can we be agile, move quickly, but make sure that we have protections for folks that need this. So it's either going to have to increase the pay rate or require some form of education and help these folks get the required skills to get them up to that pay scale to be able to afford these childcare agencies. Because if you don't give them scale and you maintain them where they are, definitely this $12 and $10 and $15 ain't going to cut it. It's not going to be able to pay for this $1,200. So you want the labor, you want the productivity, give them scale, increase their pay, let them be flexible. They are not just going to be stockers, but they are going to be customer service agents. Can they work from home? Can they come to work? Can they do other stuff? Can they be administrative assistants? Not just cashiers, not just stockers, but let them be agile, because after the pandemic, everybody's going to have to pivot. And pivoting means you have to be agile to be able to fit in the society.
Yes, there is definitely a war for talent out here. And all of us, I'm sure we're being ghosted, by, prospects. They'll apply for jobs, and then they won't show up for interviews, or they cancel at the last minute. We're seeing a lot of that. And I agree. We do have to have some flexibility and able to be agile. If there is a job for us where you can work at home, then we try to give you some flexibility. But unfortunately, for an agency like ours, we have to be where the people are at. And we serve very vulnerable populations, and so we have to be available to be able to serve those individuals. But every industry and company is different.
And I'll also mention that I think that at least I have a small businesses as well, and you just have to be quite flexible with what people's needs are when you're trying to hire them. You have to be willing to listen to what they're looking for, and if you think that they're going to be somebody that can really help your organization, you've got to work with them. So as in the housing market, we say it's a buyer's market. I almost think it's an employee's market right now. They can pick and choose who they want to work for and what they want to do.
That kind of brings, Nana Watson asked a question that kind of is an interesting question. She says Franklin County Jobs and Family Services has clients who probably want to work. Do you see any of these jobs shifting to folks who may have had issues in the past with, unemployment? Or do you, as far as do you think entry to jobs is going to change?
I would say yes. I know that the Ohio Restaurant Association has worked with trying to look at second chance individuals and try and because of the pandemic, that some of their initiatives really, I think, got sidetracked trying to make sure all these operators survive. But I do think that's something that has been on the forefront for the restaurant industry to try to really help connect the dots there and see if there are opportunities to bring people who might have not had those or might have had a spotty past and provide them opportunities for the future. So I think that there are some opportunities there. I just don't know at this point. And again, I'm involved with on the board, but I'm not in the day to day. And I think that there are some opportunities there to link the two and provide, because I know for a fact there's a lot of operators who are just looking for people who want to work hard. And that's all we're looking for, is people who are willing to put the time and effort in, and we don't care about your past. We want you to provide an opportunity for a future.
I certainly hope that happens more than it has in the past, because we've thrown away far too many people. It's just really shameful.
If I could add a little bit to what Sheila was talking about, for about close to a year now, we've been working with a great company, working with Second Chance Citizens. We've hired some of these individuals, and Stephanie was mentioning skilled trades and so forth. And Two of these individuals have just been exemplary individuals, and we're going to be sending them to school for skilled trade, and they will retain their employment while they're at our company. And I think employers right now, and I think what Stephanie mentioned, it's a hiring war right now, and I absolutely agree with her. And part of that, whether you're in manufacturing, construction, restaurant, whatever your industry is, if you're going to survive as an employer, you have to be willing to change. And we've also been recruiting heavily from a section of Columbus with a lot of new Americans and new refugees. Part of our change was you had to be able to speak English, write English. These individuals don't. We still brought them in, and we're working with them and training them. You train them differently. You show them how to do something instead of handing them a bunch of pages in English. And we've actually, if you'd have told me a couple years ago I'm going to pay for transportation for some of my workers, I would have probably looked at you a little funny.
That's right.
We're working with a company called Share Mobility, and we're paying for their transportation to and from our company. So it is a war. And to be able to win in war, you got to be, somebody mentioned flexibility earlier. You got to be flexible, and you've got to be willing to change and not be so dyed in the wool as to this is our policy and it's always going to be our policy. We basically have tore up and set fire to a lot of our hiring policies here in the last year because one, we have to, and two, it's the right thing to do with the population that we have in Central Ohio.
You know what, Sean, you are my new hero. I want you to know, because those are the kinds of employers that I think people need to know exist in this community, that you're willing to really accept and really cling to diversity and work through, as you said, with justice involved folks, with our new Americans. We've had so many employers that have hiring practices and policies that won't allow them to be able to go out and find people who may have been chronically unemployed. And so that is what part of the problem is. Folks remember, or they have family members that went to places before, and if they were just as involved, if they didn't speak, couldn't read English, didn't have the opportunities. And I think a lot of these employers are going to have to work with entities like the Urban League and Impact and other entities to come in to us and say, help us find these people, especially if you want diverse talent. We do have justice involved folks. We have a program here where we get them ready. And we now have people who are, before, you couldn't get, if you were justice involved, you couldn't get a CDL license. No one wanted to hire you in the trucking industry. Now folks are, beating down our doors to say, where are those justice involved people that you had here? So thank you, Sean, for being innovative and really thinking through this, especially for people of color and new Americans and people who have been chronically unemployed, because they will be your best workers, I guarantee you.
Absolutely.
And if I might add, Amelia, add to what my co-panelists have said. This takes us back to what Rance was talking about, being entrepreneurial minded. So if you don't change in this environment, corporations and organizations have to come out with new policies, new hiring policies after this pandemic. Because if you don't change, people are thinking of, okay, how do I work for myself and not for anybody else, if they are not willing to change their practices? So we at Wilberforce, what we are doing is our entrepreneurship center is investing in our students and not just giving them theory lessons and book lessons. We are setting up student-run organizations on campus so that students will be able to run their organizations even before they leave college. The data states that minority-owned businesses collapse after 18 months when it first starts. So we are guided by this principle and making sure that the students get that mindset, run the organizations in college. And so when they finish college, they take that skill and go into the community with that business. So right from the college, they're working for themselves. They are not applying to any organization. And that is what we are doing at Wilberforce. So organizations will have to change to be able to attract the talent that they want. If not, we're going to be stuck.
And what's so really cool about that program of yours is that you're helping folks overcome the fear factor. And it seems to me that the fear factor is the biggest thing that keeps people from starting a business. It certainly was what kept me from starting a business for many, many years. So you see yourself doing entrepreneurial things, and that makes the barrier a whole lot less to get over.
I can definitely speak to the fear factor, and I can speak to the long hours. I worked a 19-year career that oftentimes would have me working 12-hour days, back to back to back. You think you're working 8 hours, they tell you got 4 more. So that's a police and public safety position. And so I understand, that fear of feeling like, am I good enough to sustain and make a living for myself? Because, you think about certain things that your job will cover depending on where you work. Benefits are covered. And where I came from, they had a very comprehensive healthcare plan. And so when you start paying for your own healthcare, that's when you get a dose of reality. Wow, this was a part of, vacation days, sick time. That's all actually a part of the package of what your wages are, adjacent to how much money comes into your direct deposit. And so there are various things that you do need to think about. But if you can step out there, you will surprise yourself. Most people, I know that a lot of times small businesses fail within the first 3 to 5 years, but there are opportunities out there. And I think that that's something that's changed as to why people aren't working. You have a lot of people who have decided to become content creators. Black women have been leading the charge for entrepreneurship. In comparison to everybody. They've been outclassing everyone, starting new businesses or running businesses. So it's just been, it's been an eye opener.
Mm-hmm.
I should pause real quick to remind people what they're watching. I'm Amelia Robinson from the Columbus Dispatch, and you're watching Columbus Conversations, Why Aren't People Working? I want to invite you, if you have a question, to put it in the chat, and I'll get as many of those questions to our panelists as possible. Obviously, last year was very tumultuous, and a lot of that spilled over into 2021. Is the pandemic the only reason our labor market has shifted like it has, or are there other factors at play, do you think?
I think it was the springboard, but I think there are other things that have caused that to happen.
What do you think those things are?
Kind of as I stated earlier, there have been without going political, a lot of people got a chance to breathe with the money that was given and subsidized through I'm at a loss for words here, but unemployment, things like that. And so I think that people probably, as I've read other articles and reports, have gone back to school. They got educated. Some people got certifications. Some people started trades. I think that there's just a lot of things that have happened that maybe there were people on the cusp, and the time given through the pandemic caused people to spring forward. A lot of people had to scramble. A lot of people had to figure out and find a way. And, there was some resiliency that came from that. And that's caused, a lot of people to continue to push the way that they're opposite of the direction that we were January 2020.
Well, but there was also, and I agree with you, Rance, there was also the issue of, Black and brown people and poor people were already being marginalized in the marketplace, right? And weren't being, or justice involved people, or those people who have been chronically unemployed. And so I think that's really what you have to take a look at is now all of a sudden, and I was saying earlier, there's these jobs, but for so long, they weren't allowed to find those jobs. They weren't trained, or they weren't given proper training to go after these jobs. Or they didn't have the proper education attainment in order to go after these jobs, or because they were black or brown, they couldn't go after these jobs. And so now there has to be a different conversation in the communities, especially those communities that have been marginalized and oppressed, for many years. And I think that's where I think our employers and businesses are going to have to look at how they market differently, how they recruit differently. If they want diversity, they're going to have to basically invest in a different way. But black and brown people, the pandemic just exacerbated what we already were dealing with. So it wasn't like we had jobs anyway. And so I think now, the marketplace now, the employers are going to have to do different. They're going to have to market different. We need you. You got to talk to people in their language. All of those different things. And you got to rebuild trust for people to want to go back to work and know that they have the best opportunities available, that this will not just be, let me hire you for right now, but am I going to have long-term opportunities? Is there going to be room for growth? And I think, someone said it earlier, folks can be choosy now if they really want to. And I think employers have to start understanding that and do it differently, as Sean said.
If I might add, prior to the pandemic, there was this big debate about corporate profits. Huge debates about how corporations are milking ordinary Americans and paying, just meager wages to employees. And then they give you, after the year, they give you 3% increase, and then healthcare cost takes all that. The pandemic was just a catalyst, right? So now you guys were paying us pittance, but we don't have to work. If we don't want to, we can go into our own businesses. So employers are going to have to sit back and say, okay, it is not our time anymore. It's not our market. It is employees' market. And how do we attract these people back into our fold and give them some of our profits? Because we cannot have all the profits to ourselves again, because they won't work. Like I said earlier on, it did not work during the pandemic, and they lived through it, right? They didn't work. They didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to drive a car, buy a shoe, do anything. Where food were being rationalized. The family of 5 were living with a bag of rice, and they did just fine. So you better give us some of your corporate profit, share, and not pay a CEO $22 million a year and pay an employee $12 an hour, $22. So this is where we are.
Yeah, a lot of people are in the comments are talking about wages and if wages are where they should be. And obviously you hit on a lot of that discussion when you were just talking, Doctor. What do you think like the minimum wage should be in our country? Obviously, states have their own minimum wage, but what is a good minimum wage?
I don't think anybody can predict what the minimum wage is. I think individual organizations are going to have to search deep within themselves and say, okay, how do we give back the profits that we have amassed all these years?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the government should mandate anybody to pay minimum wage, because certainly the government is not going to mandate people to go and work. No, it is individual rights. I choose to work or I choose not to work. These companies know exactly how much they have made throughout these years. Lots of money. So they need to come out and say, okay, we're going to have to put something back in the community. Either build hospitals, take care of people free so that they are free from the bondage of these astronomical healthcare costs that is eating their salaries away, or build daycare centers to provide them with daycare so they don't have to pay $1,200 a week. or pay CEOs $22 million a year and leave the rest to hanging. So individual companies are going to have to search within themselves and figure out how they're going to have to share the profits.
I agree.
I agree. My only comment on that is that's for large companies, but what about finding people within small companies, companies like Rance's or my company? How do you find the answer there? Because a lot of restaurants, at least, a lot of them are just trying to survive right now. I mean, they've depended on the RRF or the PPP funds in order to keep things moving forward and keeping their doors open. So that's where I think it gets a little hairy.
You are very right, because I think from the labor statistics, I think 44% of the GDP comes from the small businesses, and that is going to be the red herring there. Mm-hmm. So this is where the federal government can come in and provide that support. But the federal government also has a duty to also talk to these corporations, these big corporations that have amassed so much wealth, to be able to help the 44% that is contributing to the GDP. That, hey, these are folks hiring people in our communities, and they also need help. How do we come together and help them?
Since I'm not too far removed from being an employee, I guess I do have a question that I think about, and that's transparency between the C-suite and the subordinate employees. And I think that's something that maybe a lot of people are having difficulty with. I just read a statistic last week that said that typically out of an 8-hour workday, there's about 3 hours and 47 minutes worth of work being done on average. Most of the rest of that is eating lunch, shopping, taking breaks, whatever the case may be. So I guess one thing that I think about in the future for future employees is how can there be transparency about those profits being made, wages being given out? Why do we pay you this amount of money for this type of work? Are those conversations being had, and do the employees actually believe what management is saying? I think that's something that we have to consider in this as well, is, what are the messages being given?
We've talked a lot about, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, to kind of echo what, Sheila was talking about, and I'm hearing all this conversation about these large corporations and so forth, and also most businesses in the United States that really make our economy go are small businesses. 75% of the manufacturers in the United States, people think of manufacturers like the big, GM, Chrysler, Toyota, Honda, whatever, General Electric, but actually 75% of the manufacturers in the United States have 20 employees or less, which is probably smaller than even a lot of restaurants. So these big profits that everybody keeps talking about to distribute the wealth and so forth, we are kind of in that same boat as a company. We're located in London, Ohio, and we have many large companies like Amazon, like Restoration Hardware, Target, whatever, in West Jefferson. And they are actually greatly impacting us and what we're trying to do as far as be competitive with wages, because these are much larger companies than what we are. And we can't compete. If they want to raise their wages, they increase every package they send out by a penny that the consumer doesn't even notice it. But we as a manufacturer, or Sheila's restaurants, that's a tremendous impact to us that we can't compete against. So, I think one thing we also need to talk about when we're looking at hiring and so forth is really also starting to talk about education. And, and I'm very focused on this, that, we host manufacturing days prior to COVID. I think I hosted four schools over the course of 2019. One of them was from a middle school in the near west side. And, you know, what I talk to these kids about, because honestly, you know, going to even a 2-year college or a 4-year college is going to be out of reach. And the coming economy, the economy that's already here, it's going to be requiring more and more technical skills. And what I'm trying to educate young people on is that you really have got to look at adult education. You know, whether it's through an Ohio Technical Center, we have several great ones around here in Central Ohio. You know, find something and go get one certificate, one training certificate in something, and then go to an employer and say, I'd like to apply for a job. And hey, I just spent 9 months and I got this certificate. You come to my company, I'd say, wow, look at that initiative. You know, this person really, you know, wants to make something of themselves. Come to me, come work in my company, have good attendance, good quality, good productivity. And we're going to have to look at building on your 9-month certificate and maybe sending you to another Ohio Technical Center or somewhere, or a community college to take another course to start building on this. And, you know, I think a lot of young people from the economics that a 2-year or 4-year college is out of reach. You know, the military is great. Military is not for everybody. So what are we going to do with this large population? And I think we really need to start talking more about getting more and more young people. And start talking to them when they're juniors in high school, or maybe even early senior years, saying, hey, you know, Johnny's going off to Ohio State and Mary's going off to Columbus State and Billy's going off to the Air Force. And you're thinking, none of that is applicable to me. I think we need to start pointing young people in the direction of where they could go get a 9-month technical certificate, not to be the end all to begin all, but give them at least that first stepping stone that when they go to work for an employer, that employer is going to want to invest in them.
So, Sean,
I think we've shot ourselves.
I'm sorry. Great thing you brought that up. In higher ed right now, we are talking about stackable micro credentials.
Absolutely.
That is what is that's the buzzword right now. If somebody graduates with a computer science degree, what does that mean? If the person graduates with a political science degree, what does that mean? What we are talking about right now is stackable micro credentials, data science, artificial intelligence, business intelligence. These are employable skills that people are earning so much, and these are areas that people can work flexibly. They don't have to be at a certain location. Cybersecurity, right? So gone were the days where GPA of 4.0 earns you what? 6 figures. Not anymore, because Google and all these big companies were hiring from the Ivy Leagues, and then kids from Ukraine and 16 years hacking into our system, City Bank, Chase Bank. And these are kids who have not had any degree. So what is the point? The point is we need to start talking about certificates, skills. What do you bring? What is your value? If we are to hire today, what value do you bring? Do you have any data science certificate, cybersecurity? Can you help us protect our systems? Internet of Things. Everything we use today has to be on the internet. Your refrigerator, your garage door, your phone, everything. And your computer, somebody can just hack in and make life miserable for you. So what value do you bring to the table? Do you have that skill set? Come on, work for us. But if we don't talk about that and we still talk about degrees, we're going to be left behind, and it's not going to help the workforce. So yes, higher education is now trying to pivot to those certificates and how students can bring value to the workforce. And as we talk about value, we shouldn't forget, people after this pandemic, a lot of people who have dedicated their lives to companies 40 years, 20 years, 15 years, are leaving the workforce to work for themselves as consultants. We should not forget. And that is also going to create a huge vacuum, because somebody who has worked for a company for 20 years, how do you fill that gap?
What, as far as like the small businesses here are concerned, what support would you like to have to help you get over this work shortage from either the government or I don't know who it would come from, or what support do you think you need to get over this?
I can take a stab at that. I think there's a lot of operators that did not receive the restaurant relief fund, which is hurt their ability to stay competitive in the marketplace. I was fortunate; I was able to apply quickly, and I received those funds. But there are multiple operators in the state that have not been able to receive those, as the funds they ran out of funds at the federal level. I do think a replenishment of that would be helpful to many operators, but also additional support for those that are hurting in our industry, of course, makes sense. There are some that have frankly have done well with the pandemic. Some portions of our industry, like pizza operators or those that really pivoted to the carryout. But I do think additional federal support that those in the hospitality industry that can prove that they need it would make a big difference in our industry.
Here's something really scary. The small business birth rate in the US has been in decline since at least the late 70s. And so the number of small business births is going down and down. Over that same time, the number of small business deaths was fairly constant. And a few years ago, those two lines crossed. And so more businesses now are dying than are being born, and that kills the dynamism of the US economy. It's something that we really need to be scared about.
What should be done to combat it, though, would you say?
Well, I think I first of all go back to what I was saying before, the fear factor. You have to introduce young people, and I think long before high school, I think maybe middle school, into the possibility that maybe you don't have to go work for a company. You can maybe do your own thing, but be realistic about your possibility of getting money for whatever it is you're offering. The question I asked everybody when in the 6 months before I started my business were, first of all, why in the world would anybody give me money to do what I do? And second of all, if I do this, will I starve? And so I think that's where the conversation needs to start.
You want to go? You want to say something, Stephanie? Were you raising your hand? Okay. So we have a couple minutes left. I figured we went on a higher optimistic note. We're talking about a lot of bad things right now. Are there things that make you optimistic that, we will survive this as a community, as a state, and things will get better and that the economy will correct itself? I mean, if you don't, that's fine too. But are there things that make you optimistic that we'll end up in a better place?
Well, the thing that I'm really optimistic about is that I think the balance between employers and workers is shifting, and I think that shift is going to last. And perhaps the large wealth gap that we've seen in this country, larger than any time since the 1920s, I think those chickens are finally coming home to roost.
Well, I think some industries are doing well, despite what we have been talking about. You have cleaning services doing well, delivery services doing well, grocery stores doing well, liquor stores are doing very well. Game companies are doing very well. Fitness equipment companies are doing very well. Telehealth services are doing well. Tutoring services are doing very well. So I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I think some industries are doing very well, and that is a sign that we will bounce back. But we are not going to bounce back as before. We're going to have to change and be agile and be flexible. Every sphere of our life, in our personal hygiene, in education, in manufacturing, in industry. We're talking about supply chain connectivity. We thought 10 years ago supply chain was the best. Now it's not at its worst. So, things are going to bounce back, but in a different form. And the preparedness of the labor force is going to be very, very key to respond to that change.
I think things will turn around, but I think it's going to have to be different. You're going to have to. There are younger people who see people in my generation struggling to pay student loan bills, struggling. So education is important, but the way kids are going about it, the way that they're seeing us in this particular situation, it's going to change, and we're going to need to figure out how to move into the future without trying to bring the past along the way that we've been doing it. Prices are going to continue to go up, and this is not the happy, optimistic thing, but inflation continues to go. Prices are going up. I'm in real estate, and so, supply and demand is a huge issue. Even in Columbus, people are getting a lot of money for their asking prices of their homes, that the value is not necessarily there. And because of supply and demand issues, of course, problems with lumber supply, which is causing the cost of new construction to go up. There are a lot of things that we got to really look at. And the biggest part of this is when you're talking about capitalism, which is what we champion in America, right? We're capitalists. But, if we're top heavy on people not really having any formidable wealth, and it's a small percentage of those with the wealth, eventually it's going to topple over. And so we just got to figure out a way to talk about wealth distribution some type of way different than we've been doing.
Rance, and I'll say, that those kinds of conversations are going on in this community, and it is about prosperity for all. And I think there is an opportunity now for everybody has to pivot, whether you want it to or not, right? And so as you pivot, this is going to be new. You can't keep doing things the same old way and expect to get different results, right? And so we're all having to pivot. And as we continue to pivot, most of us now know we can't do it by ourselves, that we have to be inclusive, that we have to look at things with an equity lens. And so I'm optimistic that as we continue to look at everything that we're doing, especially from an economic standpoint, that I think that, you're going to see something different. The George Floyd, death really sparked that social justice movement that our young people today are still going to be carrying over in other aspects of their lives. And so I think we just have to embrace what this new normal is going to look like and be like. And we have to continue to want to work together to make things happen.
What doesn't kill us makes us stronger.
That's right.
I know that there has to be some kind of intervention. Now, I'm not sure what kind of intervention, but there has to be some kind of intervention. Now, we can go into slogans, whatever we want to call it, but something's got to intervene in terms of how we educate people, how we take care of them health-wise. In every sphere of our life, some kind of intervention has to come to play for all of us to come to that realization that it is for all of us, not just a group of people.
Well, thank you so much for watching this conversation. This conversation is over, but obviously the conversation in the bigger sense of the thing is still going to go on. You can join the conversation with the Dispatch in our Facebook page, facebook.com groups, Columbus Dispatch. conversations, and we'll have some hearty interactions about this. You can share the discussion with your friends. There's also going to be a story in Sunday's Dispatch that recaps this discussion. You can also support local journalism by subscribing to the Columbus Dispatch at dispatch.com/subscribe now. I want to thank our wonderful panelists. This has been a great conversation. I really thank you guys for your expertise. We have Sean Hendricks, who is president of Nixon Chemtech America and the Central Ohio Manufacturing Partnership. Stephanie Hightower, who is CEO and president of the Columbus Urban League. Bill Lafayette of Regionomics. We have Jabat Owusu, who is the Dean of the College of Professional Studies and an Assistant Professor of Management at Wilberforce University. Rance Robinson, who is an entrepreneur. His companies are Rob the Moment, and he is Rob the Moment, which is a visual arts company. And his real estate brokerage firm is through Red One Realty. We have Sheila Trotner, who is president of Taste Hospitality Group and a board chair of the Ohio Restaurant Association. Thanks a lot. We're going to have more conversations just like this one coming up soon, and we will tell you about it in the Columbus Dispatch. Have a great night.
Bye.